Truth is often stranger than fiction, and facts can be misleading. Science as we know it today wasn't always on the up and up. Sometimes it got a little weird. Have you heard the term mesmerized? Like a deer in the headlights. Mesmerized. But what does it mean to be mesmerized? Is it the same as being hypnotized? There's a long and weird history around the practice of what eventually was called mesmerism. Mesmerism was an 18th and 19th century practice based on the concept of animal magnetism. No, not that guy. It means something else. We'll get to that later. The concept was that there was an invisible magnetic fluid surrounding us. When that fluid was out of balance, we got sick or mentally ill. That's when a mesmerizer or magnetizer would swoop in and set that balance right. The practice would not only heal people of various calamities, but could also produce clairvoyance, immunity to pain, and other amazing abilities buried deep within the human mind. The practice resembled what we see in hypnotism today, although vastly different mechanical explanations. It fell out of favor in Europe in the late 18th century, but then gained a new popularity in the United States in the early part of the 19th century. To understand the practice, we first have to talk about the founder of it, Franz Anton Mesmer. Mesmer was born in 1734 in what is now Meuse, a province in southern Germany. After studying at Jesuit university, he attended the University of Vienna, where he pursued medicine. He would eventually become a physician, writing his dissertation titled De Planetarium Influxu and Corpus Humanum, or The Influence of the Planets on the Human Body. Borrowing concepts from Sir Isaac Newton's theories, the idea was that the sun and the moon can influence tides of the human body, just as they do the tides of the ocean. 2 years later, in 1768, Franz married Anna Maria von Posch, a wealthy widow. Then he was able to establish himself as a doctor in Vienna, becoming a patron of the arts. One of his most famous projects was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Mozart even included a comedic reference to Mesmer in his opera Così fan tutte. While a doctor, he encountered a patient that would change his career forever, putting to practice the principles of his dissertation and finding the tide of the human body he was looking for, or so he thought. In 1774, Mesmer encountered a patient, Franziska Osterlin. She suffered from hysteria, an illness of emotional distress primarily affecting women. It should be noted that this is no longer an accepted diagnosis and is now considered to be incompatible with medicine or psychiatry. It often included symptoms like anxiety, insomnia, bizarre movements, fainting, and amnesia. So when Mesmer found Franziska, she was in a troubled state. The good doctor had her swallow a solution containing iron and attached magnets to various parts of her body. She found relief from her symptoms, reporting that she could feel a mysterious fluid flowing throughout her body. After considering the events, he concluded that the magnets he used had little to do with the woman's recovery. It was the animal magnetism that did the trick. The animal part of the magnetism is to distinguish it from mineral magnetism. Rather than ferrous metals being attracted by the electromagnetic force, animal magnetism had some other mysterious and invisible fluid-like substance that attracted living bodies to one another. Mesmer theorized that this fluid flowed in the body, and when it was disrupted or blocked, disease would occur. At this time, it kind of made sense. Science was confirming the existence of invisible forces. You couldn't see gravity after all, and it was undeniable. So to Mesmer, this was just another unseen energy. And if it can be detected, perhaps it can be manipulated. To control that flow, he developed several methods using his hands and some pretty intense, uncomfortable eye-gazing. Mesmer would sit in front of the patient with their knees touching, maintaining eye contact. Sometimes holding their thumbs, he would move his hands in gestures around various parts of the body. These procedures could last hours, and treatments could take years. A sign of efficacy would be a mesmeric crisis. A crisis could involve convulsions or emotional outbursts. For example, a patient struggling with mental illness may have a fit or outbreak of the same mental condition. According to Mesmer, this was a necessary evil in his treatment procedure. During and after the process, a glass harmonica would be played, a way to musically soothe the patient. Despite the strange approach, his treatment seemed to be effective, with many patients walking away much better than when they had arrived. Animal magnetism was all the rage. And Mesmer was invited to all the cool parties. With regular visits to court and a wealthy clientele, it seemed as though he had made a major scientific breakthrough. It wasn't long, however, until skepticism grew about his practice. In late 1776 through 1777, Mesmer treated the blind musician Maria Theresia von Paradis. Although her eyesight improved, she was never fully cured. She also ran the risk of losing her disability income, something that could be detrimental to her well-being as well as her loved ones. After the treatment stopped, her lack of eyesight resumed, and Mesmer was left in scandal, as he was unable to completely cure her. He moved to Paris, where he would again set up shop. The scale of his popularity would grow alongside the pushback and skepticism of his methods. By 1780, Mesmerism had grown in popularity. He even treated the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. He got so busy that he didn't have time to treat all of his patients individually, so he developed a method to provide animal magnetism to large groups of people. This method, known as the bequette, had a large tub with magnetized water. Patients would sit around the bequette, each holding onto a rod of iron that stuck out from the tub. Mesmer would then work his magic for the whole group, producing convulsions and other crises for all to observe. Paris was split between true believers and skeptics. Some demanded intervention. In 1784, without Mesmer having requested it, King Louis XVI appointed 4 members of the Faculty of Medicine as commissioners to investigate animal magnetism and mesmerism. American scientist Benjamin Franklin, Anton Lavoisier, the founder of modern chemistry, Joseph Ignace Guillotin, inventor of the guillotine, and astronomer Jean Sylvain Bailly were selected to conduct experiments that would either validate or disprove Mesmer's theories. They set out to attempt one of the very early controlled science trials. Rather than put Mesmer on trial, the commission put his methods in the hot seat. They used the magnetic procedures while patients were blindfolded, or told them that the water they drank was magnetized when it wasn't. They also flipped the script and gave them magnetized water, claiming it was ordinary. Sure enough, when the patients thought they were being magnetized, they reacted with a crisis, even when given a placebo. What they determined from the experiments was that the effects of the process were only effective when the patient was aware of the procedure, although the procedures were indeed effective to a large degree. They determined that there was no such thing as animal magnetism, and the mystery fluid was non-existent. Instead, they determined the efficacy of the mesmerism was from the placebo effect, something they deemed as imagination. Mesmer was humiliated, and although he continued to practice until his death in 1815, his career would never be the same. Mesmerism did have a revival in the 1830s, especially in popular culture, gaining the attention of authors like Charles Dickens, who was fascinated with the process and even experimented using the techniques on his wife. He wrote about it in an unfinished novel, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote about mesmerism in his stories The House of the Seven Gables and The Blithedale Romance. Mesmerism even found its way into the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. He wrote a story called Mesmeric Revelation, about a man who, when mesmerized, experienced clairvoyance during a crisis. The story was reprinted in the Popular Record of Modern Science, and due to it being mistaken as fact, Poe followed up with another tale of mesmerism, The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar, which was a story about a man being mesmerized just before the hour of his death. This story as well was taken to be factual, and although Poe strung things along, he eventually admitted it to be a work of fiction. Although the mechanics of the practice were unproven, no animal magnetic fluid has ever been found, the fact is, Mesmer was pretty effective. Most doctors at the time practiced bloodletting and other unproductive practices. Sitting in a room with a guy waving his hands and staring at you was a welcome change, even revolutionary from a typical and often painful doctor visit. The commission showed the power of the placebo effect, what they called imagination. Stripping the magnetic fluid explanation and focusing on the fact that the brain was able to facilitate the therapeutic effects, we were left with the practice we now know as hypnotherapy. Now a legitimate tool, physicians and psychologists may use hypnosis to treat depression, anxiety, eating disorders, sleep disorders, compulsive gambling, phobias, and post-traumatic stress. The understanding now is the altered state of consciousness is more about a very selective hyperfocus than organic magnets. It might not be what Mesmer wanted, but his rise to popularity allowed us to examine the practice closer and get something worthwhile from it. Even though it was a strange science and seems odd nowadays, it was really an attempt to use science to explain the unexplainable, a way to quantify the spiritual. The practice may not have survived the scrutiny of the scientific method, but it did give us a lesson. The discovery of truth often unfolds in strange and unusual ways.